record two things. That we had a juror exhibit number 2, which I showed you, counsel, at the bench. It says, was the blood determined to be Mr. Perez's on vehicle and vehicle? Was bone fragment determined to be Mr. Perez's? Testimony was not clear. You've seen that one. There's nothing to respond to. Testimony was clear. There was none on that. Received another note from the juror, juror exhibit number 3, request that the defendant be seated closer to the jury so she can be observed. I've exposed that to both the state and the defendant. Anything further for the record of the state?
No, I'm sorry.
Anything further for the record for the defendant?
No, Your Honor.
We may invite you in.
Yes.
Finish with state.
Thank you, Your Honor. Agent Louder, I believe that you we had just put into evidence the fingerprint laden cards off of the knife hand.
Yes, that's correct.
And you continued to be involved with this case after the initial day of June 16th. Is that right?
That's correct.
At some point, were you, while on duty with CCBI, asked to do an examination and processing of a Jeep in this case?
Yes, I was.
Okay, and can you tell us a little bit about that?
Excuse me. On June 17th, I was requested to respond to CCBI facilities, 3301 Hammond Road, where there were 2 vehicles that were secured in our vehicle bay for further processing. The Sheriff's Department requested that I examine a Jeep for various types of evidence.
And so, did you find out where that Jeep had been taken from or who it belonged to?
I believe that I was told that it was belonged to Jose Perez, and it was recovered from his residence. I believe it was Schoolhouse Street.
And if you would just describe what that Jeep looked like.
It was a green in color 4-door Jeep Wrangler. It had a North Carolina registration of H935 with DV, which stood for Disabled Veteran.
And upon arriving there, and we heard a little bit yesterday about the vehicle bay there at CCBI. Is that the location where this car had been brought?
It was.
Okay. And tell us what you did once you got there.
The vehicle was secured in our facility through a locked gate. I unsecured it, and the first thing I did was photograph it to document it in the condition in which I found it. After I photographed it, I began to look on the exterior of the vehicle for possible blood.
And tell us what you found.
There were several areas on the exterior of this vehicle that appeared to have possible blood on them. One was the exterior right rear passenger wheel well, the exterior right rear passenger door on the bottom, the exterior right rear passenger door near the bumper, the partition between the front passenger door and the rear passenger door, the exterior front passenger door, the bottom of the running board that was used on the passenger side. All those areas had suspected blood on them, so I tested them with phenolphthalein, process which we've already talked about. I swabbed each individual area, tested it with those 3 chemicals, and a positive reaction occurred immediately, meaning that color change happened immediately. I then used a second swab on all those areas to collect what appeared to be the blood.
Okay. And what, if any, other evidence did you collect from the vehicle that day?
After I examined the exterior of the vehicle, I moved into the interior of the vehicle. I examined that for just any types of evidence that I could find, as well as possible blood. On the front floorboard of the front passenger door, what appeared to be a piece of a denture was located. I collected that and photographed it as well. And then on the rear passenger door, on the rear passenger floorboard near the center console, where the center console was on the back, there was an area of suspected blood and what appeared to be a gold projectile. A projectile is the fired part of a bullet from a gun.
And just for clarification, can you describe kind of where that was exactly?
Sure. If you're sitting in the rear passenger seat and the front passenger seat is in front of you, the center console came down right about here, and there was suspected blood on the floor, and the projectile was located near the blood on the floor.
On the floorboard between the front passenger seat and the back passenger seat?
Yes, that's correct.
What other, if any, evidence did you collect from the Jeep?
From the interior of the Jeep, there were also several areas of suspected blood. They were from the interior front passenger door, the front passenger seat belt, the glove box, the interior front passenger door pocket, so the pocket that's on the door, the radio, the gear shift, the center console, as well as the floorboard on the right rear passenger door. Again, all of those areas were swabbed, tested with phenolphthalein, and every single one of those areas had a positive reaction after the 3 chemicals were placed on them, and every single area was then collected.
Talk to us a little bit. I mean, you're talking about all these different spots where you noticed what appeared to be suspected blood. Give us a visual, if you will, of the inside of the vehicle.
The inside of the vehicle appeared to be pretty neat and tidy, relatively clean. Some areas, like on the radio and the gear shift, they were smaller stains where on the seatbelt it appeared to be a larger stain. The stains just varied throughout the car, but the car appeared to be very clean and tidy.
Did you take any other types of evidence or process the Jeep in any other way on the 17th?
I did. I came back later I'm sorry.
Were you able to find, or did you look for any latent evidence in the Jeep?
I did. On the 18th of June, the next day, I came back and processed the vehicle for latent evidence, as well as trace evidence.
And again, just for those of us who don't do this every day, when you mention latent evidence, what are you referring to?
Latent evidence is fingerprint evidence. So the interior and the exterior of the entire car were processed for fingerprints. In this particular case, I had already told you guys that I had used magnetic powder on a knife. In this case, I used volcanic powder. It's just a lighter, airier powder. It's actually black volcanic ash. So it's in a container. I take a brush that is made of almost like a feathery substance, dip it into the powder, and then I just gently paint the powder onto the car. And the powder will adhere to, again, the moisture left behind from the fingerprints. And when I develop fingerprints on the car, it's the same process of me lifting them as I talked about on the knife. It's a clear packaging tape, similar to packaging tape, that I'll place over the fingerprint. The fingerprint adheres to the sticky side of the tape, and then I place it on an index card.
And this volcanic powder, what color is it?
It's black.
So does it create a similar latent card to those that we've seen?
Yes, it does. And again, the reason I use black powder is because of the contrast of the car with the black powder.
Was there any other processing of the Jeep that you did involving this case
On this particular day?
at all?
Yes. After I was done with it at the lab, the Wake County Sheriff's Department took the Jeep to their facilities, and I was called back out there to examine the Jeep again.
And when they take it or remove it to their facility, what's the purpose of that?
The only reason that it's stored at CCBI is for the processing. The Wake County Sheriff's Department holds on because the case is still ongoing, so there might be additional evidence that we might need to look for.
And why were you called back out, or why were you called there?
The Sheriff's Department wanted me to examine the seats of the vehicle for possible blood. Based on their investigation, I guess they had found some more information.
All right, so what did you do?
As soon as I got there, I again photographed the car so we could see the condition that it was kept in. I examined the seat cushions as well as the actual seat covers of the vehicle. And it was specifically the front passenger side of the vehicle that we were interested in.
And what, if anything, did you observe?
On the front passenger seat cover, what appeared to be blood was located. That was tested with phenolphthalein, and a positive reaction did occur. I then actually removed the seat cover and the seat padding from that particular seat and collected them as items so we could analyze them a little bit more in the laboratory setting.
And in doing that, what did you find? Describe what you saw.
When they were examined in the lab?
Upon removing them, yes, and examining them in the lab.
When I got the items back to the lab, I tested the seat covers with phenolphthalein. I had cut up the seat covers to where there was a top portion, so where your back is, and then a bottom portion where you sit on it. During that, the seat cover for the bottom portion of the seat cover was tested with phenolphthalein, and a positive reaction did occur, giving the presence of blood, so that was collected. A swab of that was collected. The same thing with the back portion of the seat, what appeared to be blood. I then used, the seat cushions were of a foamy material, so it was you couldn't swab the suspected area. The cushion had absorbed whatever we thought was blood. So in order to test this for blood, I had to use a different chemical called OBTI. And in this process, the way that we test this area is we'll actually take a small sample, and it's a prepackaged kit that's given to us. So we'll take a small sample of the suspected area of blood, we'll place it in a tube which has a liquid in it, and we'll mix that tube up for a little bit so that liquid becomes concentrated with the suspected area, the suspected stain. It's then, the several drops of that are then placed into like a reservoir, and two lines will form if it's a positive for blood. So OBT, it's similar to, it's like a little square, it almost looks like a pregnancy test. So two lines will form indicating that yes, this is positive, it's reacting with the hemoglobin, and if two lines don't form, then it's a negative for blood.
And positive meaning that?
Positive meaning that it is positive for blood.
And then what was done with those items at that time?
The items were then repackaged.
For what purpose?
Just to make sure they stayed secure and were not contaminated.
Describe a little bit the Jeep as you saw it once you removed the cushions and removed the exterior of the cushions.
Once I removed the cushions, it was just the metal of the front passenger seat that was left behind.
And in the lab and looking at these cushions, describe for us, you've talked about suspected areas of blood. Can you kind of give us a visual of what that?
Yeah, a suspected area, what appeared to, they were yellow cushions, and so what appeared to be a suspected area was a dry reddish brown stain in various places on the cushions.
If I could approach Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
Starting with what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 16. Can you identify that, please?
It's one swab of suspected blood from the exterior front passenger.
And are you able to identify that based on the markings on the envelope?
Yes, it's my item number 14, and it has my information and as well as case numbers on the front.
Okay. And if you would go ahead and open that. Do you recognize that item inside to be the swab that you described from the exterior passenger door?
Yes, it is.
Does it appear to be in substantially the same condition as that day in which you took that swab?
It does.
We would ask the State's Exhibit number 16 be admitted into evidence.
Any objection? Your Honor. Motion last.
Looking at what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 17, can you identify?
Number 17 is one swab of suspected blood from the front passenger seatbelt.
And tell us, if you will, if you remember, based on observing the Jeep and the passenger seatbelt, where on this passenger seatbelt the blood was?
I believe the blood was on the portion that comes across your chest.
Okay. And if you would go ahead and open what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 17. Do you recognize that?
Yes,
And what do you recognize it to be?
the swab that I collected.
Okay, and it's in substantially the same condition on the date in which you collected it.
Yes, ma'am.
Now we'd ask the State's Exhibit number 17 be admitted into evidence.
Any objection? Your Honor. Motion last.
I could then have you identify what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 18.
It's a swab of suspected blood from the glove box.
And if you would please, Agent Lowder, open that.
It's
Do
another.
you recognize that
Yes, I do.
as being,
The swab that I collected from the glove
is it
box.
in substantially the same condition as on the date you collected it?
Yes, it is.
Now, we would ask that State's Exhibit number 18 be admitted into evidence.
Any objection? Your Honor. Motion last.
Now turning to what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 19. If I could ask you please to identify that for the court.
It's one sealed envelope containing one suspected blood swab from the front bumper.
And where along the front bumper was this found?
I believe it was If you're looking at the car, it was towards the front passenger side of the vehicle.
If you would please open. Do you recognize that? If so, what as?
Yes, I do. It's the swab that I collected from the front bumper.
No, we would ask, I'm sorry, is it substantially in the same condition as on the day you collected it?
Yes, it is.
We would ask that State's Exhibit number 19 be admitted into evidence.
Any objection? No objection, Your Honor. Motion allowed.
I could now ask you to open what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 20. And if you would identify prior to opening what that is.
It's one piece of suspected denture from the front passenger floorboard.
Was that taken from the front floorboard of the Jeep?
Yes, it was.
You recognize that to be the suspected broken denture piece that you collected from the Jeep?
Yes, I do.
Is it in substantially the same condition as it was on the day you collected it?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, we would ask that State's Exhibit number 20 be admitted into evidence.
Any objection? No objection, Your Honor. Motion allowed.
Did you have opportunity to photograph this piece of suspected denture?
I did.
And State's Exhibit number 21, can you identify that for the court?
It's one golden color projectile from the rear passenger floorboard.
And how can you identify it?
My markings are on the exterior of the envelope again.
And if you could, please open that. If you recognize that to be the projectile that you collected from the Jeep,
Yes, I do.
and is it substantially in the same condition as when you collected it?
Yes, it was.
Now, we would ask that State's Exhibit number 21 be admitted into evidence.
Any objection? No objection, Your Honor.
And
Motion
did you
allowed.
have, thank you, Your Honor, did you have opportunity to photograph that as well?
I did.
And we'll be taking an opportunity to look at some of the work that you did in the lab, in photographing and measuring some of these items in just a little while. If I may approach, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
You could identify for the court what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 22.
It is my item number 60. It's a latent envelope that contains latent cards 3 through 19. Again, it has the CCBI case number, Wake County case number, the date, type of offense, Jose Perez is the victim, and my name on it, and I've also sealed it.
Okay. If you would please go ahead and open that. You recognize those to be the latent lift cards that you took from the Jeep on June 17th and 18th.
Yes, I do.
Your Honor, if I may approach.
Yes, ma'am.
I was trying to put it in order.
Here, these have now been marked State's Exhibit 22A through 22Q for each individual lift card that was contained within State's Exhibit number 22. Are these substantially in the same condition as on the date in which you collected them?
They are. There are several markings on the front of them from the latent examiners, though.
And we've talked about that a little bit earlier, but the latent examiner's job is to...
Once I've collected these, they're the ones that examine them for identification.
And so once you collected them, what did you do with those?
I placed them in this envelope, sealed them, then placed them in the locker for the latent examiners to pick up.
Your Honor, we would ask that State's Exhibit number 22, including 22A through Q, be admitted into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Motion allowed.
We've talked a lot about the different areas from which you took suspected blood swabs. Tell us a little bit about the amount of blood that you observed in the vehicle.
Inside the vehicle?
Yes, and on the outside.
On the interior of the vehicle, it was, like I said, the points just varied. There were some places where it was larger stains, some places with smaller stains. Larger stain was on the seat belt, and also on the seat, I believe. The ones on the door and the glove box were just almost little droplets of blood, as well as on the exterior.
And when you say larger areas, such as on the passenger seat belt, I believe we saw a picture of that yesterday, but roughly?
I would say it was probably a couple inches long.
Okay. In addition to processing the Jeep at the lab, did you have occasion to process any other items there at the lab?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And tell us, I think we talked a little bit about how on the first date in question, June 16th, you went back to the lab after having been at the crime scene and processed the knife and shoes. What other days were you involved in processing evidence at the crime lab, CCBI?
On June 24th, I also processed several items in the lab for various types of evidence. Go ahead. Sorry.
To your knowledge, where did those items come from?
I believe the items came from Agent Jarecki as well as Agent Smithy from the autopsy.
And tell us what some of those items were and what you did on that day in question. What do we mean when we say processing?
Depending on the evidence was depending on what I was looking for. Some of the items I just photographed, and some of the items I further processed for blood as well as possible touch DNA. They included the denture that I just looked at. I photographed that again. Agent Jarecki had given a cloth stained with suspected blood, an Armor All container. From Shane Smithy, I got item 32, which was from the autopsy of Mr. Perez. They were broken dentures. I also got a sealed bag that contained a watch, a ring, and a wristband. I also received Mr. Perez's shirt. The golden color projectile was also photographed. I believe Agent Jarecki collected 4 vehicle floor mats. There was also a Rampage knife box, as well as a stun gun zap stick. That was also collected by Agent Jarecki. And the rest of the items were collected by Agent Jarecki as well. A pair of jean shorts, a belt, a pair of flip-flops, as well as a black and colored t-shirt.
If I may approach.
Okay.
report what's been marked as State's Exhibit Number 2.
They're photographs that I took in the lab setting.
And are they illustrative of the things that you were processing in the lab on that day?
It's 2 different days, yes ma'am.
2 different days. And those days were?
I believe they were the day that we were just talking about, the 24th, as well as...
Some of the items from June 16th.
Yes ma'am.
And have these pictures been altered in any way?
No.
And will they help you or aid you in your testimony today?
Yes, they will.
We would ask that State's Exhibit Number 2 be admitted into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Motion allowed.
We would ask permission to publish State's Exhibit Number 2 to the jury.
Yes.
Thank you.
Agent Louder, starting with what has been marked as photograph number 19 in State's Exhibit 2, should I identify that?
This is a photograph of item number 6. It was the knife that was collected on scene. It was taken directly out of the packaging and photographed just as I found it on scene.
Okay. And looking at what's been marked as photograph number 20 within State's Exhibit 2.
State's Exhibit number 2 is a photograph of the knife with a scale. This right here is just to elevate the scale so that the scale is on the same plane as the knife.
And what there exactly are you measuring?
The knife handle,
And the length of the knife handle is found to be?
about 5.5 inches.
You've mentioned in your testimony areas on the knife that appeared to be of suspected blood. Are any of those visible in this picture?
No.
Looking at what has been marked as State's Exhibit Number 2, photograph 21, what is this a picture of?
After I opened the knife blade, you can see the area of suspected blood, and I also photographed it with a scale.
And what was the length of the blade?
The blade was a little bit over 6 inches.
And describe for us, if you will, kind of how this knife operated. Was it a spring-loaded knife? Was it a fold knife?
It was a folding knife, but it would spring open with a little handle that it had. It wasn't like one that would, like a sling blade. It's not like that.
And you've testified as to taking swabs of suspected blood on the knife, or is this indicative of where those swabs would have come from?
Yes, the swab of suspected blood from the blade came from this area.
Looking at what's been marked as photograph number 22 within State's Exhibit Number 2, can you identify for us what those items are, that item is?
This is the pair of pants that were taken from Mr. Perez on scene.
And in addition to photographing these pants, and if you would identify for us number 23 within State's Exhibit 22.
This is a picture of the backside of the pants.
In addition to photographing these pants, what, if anything, did you do with them?
I processed these pants with a chemical called leucocrystal violet. It's a combination of 4 chemicals. And what it does is it will enhance blood that you can't see with your naked eye, and it fixes it. So if you can see closely on there is some sort of pattern on the pants. And I wanted to enhance it anymore to see if we could tell what it was. So the chemical was sprayed on the pants, and it reacts with the blood by turning a purple color, which is fixated onto that object, meaning it's not going to wipe away. It's there permanently to help try and enhance this pattern.
Were you able to make a determination at any point as to what that pattern was?
No, I wasn't.
After you had done that, I'm sorry, going back to that picture, after you had done that, what if any other processing? I apologize, Your Honor.
Did I do that?
I don't know. Oh, excuse me.
Is it on? It's on
All
now.
right, Rebecca.
Is it?
I apologize. What if any other processing was done to the shorts?
The areas that had the fabric on them, they were cut out. And so there were several areas here, and I believe there was another one over on this side that we actually cut from the pants to keep as separate pieces of evidence.
And the purpose for cutting those?
I don't examine it for any type of match. That would be a latent examiner that would examine this to a particular, any type of item that we thought it was a match to. So we removed those items so that they could be examined further by a latent examiner.
I'm looking at what has been marked as photograph number 24 within State's Exhibit number 2. What is that a photograph of?
This is a picture of the rear passenger floorboard. This is the bottom of the center console, and this is actually the bolt for the seat on the front of the front passenger seat. This is the suspected blood stain and the projectile.
And is this a picture that you took on the day that you processed the Jeep at
That's
the
correct.
CCBI? And looking at what's been marked as photograph number 25 within State's Exhibit number 2, what is this a photo of?
It's just an alternate photo of the projectile. I had removed it and I'm holding it.
So is that once it had been collected and taken to the lab?
Yes, ma'am.
And looking at photograph number 26 within State's Exhibit number 2, can you identify that?
That's the golden color projectile that I located in the car, and it's just photographed with a scale.
And is there anything on the projectile?
What appears to be blood located on the projectile.
And looking at photograph number 27 of State's Exhibit number 2, is that just a different angle of the projectile?
It is. It's just looking straight down on the projectile.
I believe a little while ago you testified as to a collection you had made from the front passenger seat floorboard of what you anticipated would be a suspected piece of denture. Looking at photograph number 28, can you identify that for us?
Yes, it's my item number 47. This is the CCBI case number 134045 and my name. And that's the suspected piece of denture that I removed from the front passenger floorboard.
And there in photograph number 29 of State's Exhibit number 2.
It's just another photo of the denture with a scale.
Looking at what's been marked as photograph number 30 within State's Exhibit number 2, tell me about these items.
This item was placed in my evidence locker by Shane Smithy.
And who is Shane Smithy?
She was currently at the time an agent who worked with CCBI.
Okay. And do you know where these items came from?
She responded to the autopsy at the medical examiner's office, and these were recovered from the doctor.
And they were deposited in your evidence locker for what purpose?
Because I'm the primary, so I was in charge of all evidence in this case.
And by primary, lead agent?
Lead agent, yes.
And if you would describe what this is a photograph of.
In my evidence locker was a picture of, or a bag that was sealed of dentures. And I just wanted to have another photograph of it because we don't have photographs of them from the medical examiner's office. So for my documentation, I went ahead and photographed the items that she collected from the autopsy.
Did you have opportunity to observe at the scene whether the victim was wearing dentures or had dentures?
Due to the rigor, which we had already talked about the tightening of the muscles, I attempted to open his mouth slightly, but was unable to.
Looking at what's been marked as photograph number 31 within State's Exhibit 2, is that another view of the dentures?
Yes, ma'am.
And just compared to the scale?
It's just a close-up photograph of the denture with a scale.
Looking at what's been marked as photograph number 32 within State's Exhibit 2, what is that?
The items that I had discussed earlier when we were talking about the deceased and what I found on his body was his watch, a wedding band, and this is a yellow in color wristband.
And looking at what's been marked as photograph number 33 within State's Exhibit number 2.
It's a ring that appears to be a wedding band.
And was that found on the victim at the time?
Yes, ma'am.
And looking at page or photograph 34 of State's Exhibit number 2, what is that?
This is the yellow in color wristband that was located on his wrist at the time.
Okay, and can you make out what it says?
I believe it said support our veterans.
And obviously there's discoloration on it. Can you talk about that?
The reddish brown stains are what appears to be suspected blood stains.
Were you made aware at some point that items had been removed from the home at which the victim and the defendant resided?
Yes, I believe those were from Agent Jarecki.
Okay, and were those kind of like the items from CCBI Agent Smithy left for you in your evidence locker?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and did you have opportunity to process some of those as part of your work in the lab that day?
I did.
Okay, looking at photograph number 35 in State's Exhibit number 2, what is that a photograph of?
It's a photograph of Armor All leather wipes.
And do you know where that was removed from?
I believe it was taken from the garage.
Okay, and looking at what's been marked as photograph number 36 within State's Exhibit number 2.
This is the Zap Stick 800 kilovolt stun gun.
Okay. And what, if any, processing did you do with this after you photographed it?
With the stun gun, I swabbed it for possible touch DNA again. I swabbed it in two particular areas. I did it in the handle. I also did it up on the top where the probes would be. After I did that, I removed this handle part because there was a battery cover. Underneath the battery cover there was an unknown hair or fiber that was located there. I then collected it. The stun gun was also processed for fingerprint evidence, and it was the same process that I talked about earlier. It was placed in that super glue chamber, then powder was applied to it. There were no fingerprints during that time, so then it was dye stained. And that's similar to almost washing this object with a colored dye. So I used a chemical called Ardox, which is a yellow dye stain, again, to give me the contrast between the black and yellow. I then examined it underneath an alternate light source, which I can use various different wavelengths, and no fingerprints were located on that.
And can you describe for us, when you say alternate light source, is that like a fluorescent light, or kind of, what does that look like?
It's very similar to like a fluorescent light, but it gives me like a rainbow. It gives me all colors of all wavelengths. So it produces yellow light, orange light, blue light, green light. And when I examine this, I go through the entire color spectrum just to see if there's any chance that maybe one particular light gives me a better contrast due to the chemical processing as to another one.
Now, upon obtaining this particular item, was it packaged with any other item based on your memory?
I believe it was packaged with a knife box.
Okay. And so in your processing of it, did you break that out and repackage it?
I did. I separated the two items.
Okay. Did you find any latent evidence
On
on the Zap stick?
No, I didn't.
And in terms of the touch DNA, I know we talked about that a little bit earlier, but again, just to remind people.
Again, touch DNA is something that is not seen by the naked eye, so it's epithelial cells that are left behind after touching something. And again, it can be there and it cannot be there. It just depends on how this item was found, how it was stored, even the type of surface that it's in.
Is that true for fingerprints too? Are there certain surfaces that fingerprints tend to adhere to better than others?
Absolutely. Surfaces that are smooth, or as we say, they're not porous, they're not a bumpy surface, I'm more likely to get a fingerprint on a smoother surface. The Zap stick in particular was a very textured surface.
Turning to what has been marked as photograph number 37 within State's Exhibit number 2. Tell us about this item.
This is a Rampage knife box. I believe Agent Jarecki collected that. It was packaged with the Zap stick and I separated them out.
And so based on the labeling of that item, were you able to determine if it had been collected at the home?
I believe it was collected at the home.
Okay. Having collected and photographed and processed the knife that was located at the scene, were you able to make a determination about this knife box?
It appears to be a very similar knife box. The photo here looks almost identical to the knife that was collected.
And other than photographing this, and there seems to be here two different distinct pieces. Can you talk a little bit about what those are?
During my examination, it appeared that the blue part was the top of the box and the white part was the bottom of the knife box.
Okay. And other than photographing the knife box, and I believe if you look at photograph number 38 within State's Exhibit number 2, that being a closer up, is that right, of the knife box?
That's correct.
Okay. There appears to be some discoloring maybe over on the left-hand side, bottom of the knife box.
Right in through here, what appears to be a suspected blood stain was located.
Okay. What, if any, processing to this knife box did you do?
The suspected blood stain was tested with phenolphthalein, which had a positive reaction. I then collected that.
Anything else that you did pertaining to this knife box?
I did. I processed this box for possible fingerprint evidence as well.
And how did you go about doing that?
With the box, even though the box is made of cardboard, it still had a shiny surface on it. So it went along with the same process that I've been talking about. I placed it in a super glue chamber where the super glue adhered to any possible fingerprints. Once it was done in the super glue chamber, I then processed it with black magnetic powder again to give the color contrast. And I believe after that there were multiple areas where I found possible fingerprints that I collected. And I collected again with using the tape, placing it over the fingerprint, collecting that fingerprint from the adhesive side and putting it on a note card.
And then those note cards were submitted to your latent examiner?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Looking at what's been marked as photograph number 39 within State's Exhibit number 2, what was this a picture of?
This is a photograph of Jose Perez's shirt that was recovered from the autopsy.
Okay. And is it the same shirt that you saw on the victim on the day that you responded to the crime scene?
Yes, ma'am.
And looking at photograph number 40 within State's Exhibit number 2, what is that a picture of?
This is a defect that I found in the shirt, and it's located on the back, near where you'd find your tag on your shirt.
And is it consistent with, I think you testified when we talked about injuries to the victim's body, there being what you referred to as a gun defect, gun wound defect across the back of his neck. Is it consistent with this location of where that would be?
It is.
What, if anything, did you do, other than obviously photographing it, to process this Perez shirt?
Other than his shirt, I just photographed various possible puncture wounds or other defects located in the shirt.
Turning to what's been marked as State's Exhibit 2, photograph number 41, what is that a photograph of?
It's a photograph of a black and color V-neck t-shirt that was recovered by Agent Jarecki.
Okay, and could you tell whether it's a woman's shirt or?
It appeared to be a woman's shirt.
Okay, and what, if anything, of note did it have?
There were suspected possible blood stains on this shirt as well.
Looking at what's been marked as photograph number 42 within State's Exhibit number 2, can you identify or point out for the jury, please, where you saw suspected blood stains?
This is just a close-up of the shirt, and the suspected stains are running through here.
And looking at photograph number 42 within State's Exhibit, photograph number 43 within State's Exhibit number 2, is that a continuation of that same shirt?
It is. It's a continuation of more suspected blood on the white of the shirt.
What, if anything, additional was done in processing that shirt?
Those areas were tested with phenolphthalein to see if it was a positive reaction, and they were.
And again, phenolphthalein being a presumptive test for blood?
For blood, yes. The 3-part test.
Right.
So the area was swabbed, and then it was tested with the 3 chemicals, and an immediate positive reaction occurred on that.
And then looking at what's been marked as photograph number 44 within State's Exhibit number 2.
These were a pair of denim shorts that were recovered by Agent Jarecki from the home.
And what, if anything, did you notice about these shorts?
There were several areas of suspected blood on them. I believe they were an Old Navy Diva brand of shorts.
And what, if any, additional processing did you do other than photographing?
Just like the shirt, I tested the various areas for suspected blood. I believe there were 4 areas on these pants that I tested. It was on the front of both legs and the back of both legs. And all 4 of those areas tested positive with phenolphthalein, and they were all collected.
Okay. And you've talked about, and that was true on the previous shirt, testing these suspected blood spots with phenolphthalein to determine whether they were hemoglobin or blood. Once you did that and received a positive reaction, did you then collect samples?
I did. I used another swab to collect the samples. So there was 1 swab used to test it, and then a second swab was used to actually collect it.
And what's the purpose of that, or what happened to those swabs?
The swabs, just like the other swabs you've seen, I placed on a capture, sealed them, placed them in the envelope, sealed them shut, and they were secured until the investigation was done. And some items were sent to the SBI for further analysis.
Okay. Looking at what's been marked as photograph number 45, is that the back of those shorts that we've talked about?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and looking at what's been marked as photograph, let me go back to that just for a moment. Was there anything on the back of those shorts that you noticed?
Not other than the suspected blood.
Okay. Looking at what's been marked as photograph number 46 within State's Exhibit number 2, what is that a photograph of?
It was a white and color belt that Agent Jarecki had also recovered from her original search warrant.
And what did you identify there on that belt?
There's an area of suspected blood on that belt as well.
Okay, if you could point that out to the jury, and what did you do in regards to processing that?
That area was swabbed, was tested with phenolphthalein, and it again was positive. I then used a second swab to collect it.
Looking at what's been marked as photograph number 47 within State's Exhibit number 2, if you could please identify that for the court.
This is another item that Agent Jarecki had collected. It was a white cloth with possible blood stains located on it.
And what, if anything, did you do in processing that?
Overall photographs, I believe, were just taken of that one.
Okay. Agent Louder, you can take a seat. Thank you. go through a number of the swabs that you've just testified about. If you would identify for the court what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 23.
Item number 23 is a swab from my item number 20, which was the Rampage knife box.
Okay, and if you would open that. Do you recognize that to be the same swab that you took on June 24th as you were processing these items?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And actually, as to that one from the knife, was that taken on June 16th in the lab?
This one was from the knife box.
Knife box, okay, so it was on June 24th.
It was on June
And is
24th.
it in substantially the same condition?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, we would ask that State's Exhibit number 23 be admitted into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Well,
Looking at what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 24, can you identify that for the court?
It's a swab of a suspected DNA from item number 70, which is the Zap stick.
Okay, and if you would go ahead and open that. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
And how are you able to do so?
Has my markings on the envelope, my information, as well as my initials from when I sealed it.
You recognize it to be what?
The swab of possible DNA from the Zap stick.
Okay, and is it in substantially the same condition as on the date you collected it?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, we'd ask that State's Exhibit number 24 be admitted into evidence.
any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Motion waived.
Looking at what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 25. If you could identify by its markings what that is.
This is a swab of suspected blood from item number 23, which is the denim pants, and it's from the front right leg.
And if you would please open that. And if you could please identify that for the court.
It appears to be the swab that I collected. Again, it has my markings and my name on the back of it.
Is it in substantially the same condition as the day you collected it?
Yes, it is.
Okay, we would ask, Your Honor, that State's Exhibit number 25 be admitted into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Motion waived.
Looking at what's been marked as State's Exhibit 26, to identify what that is for the court.
Item number 26 is one swab of DNA from item number 70, which is the Zap stick. This one is from the probes.
If you would please open that. Is that item,
Yes, it's the swab that I collected from the probes.
and how do you recognize it?
My markings and identification are on it, as well as my description of the item.
Does it appear to be in substantially the same condition as on the date you collected it?
Yes, it does.
Well, we would ask that State's Exhibit number 26 be admitted into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
May I approach, Your Honor? If you could please identify as what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 31.
31 is a swab from item number 26, which is the black and colored t-shirt that we just saw the photo of, new agenda brand, size unknown.
And how are you able to identify that?
Again, my markings are on the exterior of the envelope as well as my initials sealing the back of it.
And if you would open that envelope, please. Do you recognize that item?
Yes, that's the swab that I collected.
Okay, and is it in substantially the same condition as on the date you collected it?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, we would ask that State's Exhibit number 31 be admitted into evidence.
Any objection? No objection, Your Honor. Motion passed.
Looking at what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 32, can you identify for the court what that is?
It's a swab of suspected blood from the ceiling above the driver's side of the Jeep.
Was that taken, I think we've had some testimony about your processing of the Jeep at CCBI. Was that taken, that swab taken at that time?
That swab was taken on June 28th at 2300 Law Enforcement Drive when the...
Where the Wake County Sheriff's Office had moved it.
That's correct.
Okay, if you would please open that. You recognize that?
Yes.
And how do you recognize it?
It's the swab that I collected as well as it has my markings, again, on the exterior and on the seal of the envelope.
Is it in substantially the same condition as on the date that you collected it?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, the State would ask that State's Exhibit number 32 be admitted into evidence.
Any objection? No objection, Your Honor. Motion passed.
Finally, Agent Louder, looking at what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 27, can you identify for the court what that is?
This is a Leighton envelope that I labeled as item number 86, and it contains Leighton cards 23 through 24. Again, it has my markings on the exterior, CCBI case number, etc.
And these are the latent lists that were taken from what piece of evidence?
The Rampage knife box?
And are those the ones that we've testified about just previously?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, processing the knife box in the lab. If you would please open the envelope. I may approach your...
Yes, ma'am.
Now marked these as State's Exhibit 27A and 27B. Are they substantially in the same condition as on the date that you took them and created the latent lift cards?
They are. Again, they just have markings from the Leighton examiners on the front of them.
All right, at this time, we would ask that State's Exhibit number 27 be admitted into evidence, and A and B.
Any objection? No objection, Your Honor. Motion passed.
Agent Louder, in addition to processing these items in the lab, what, if any, additional investigation did you do in this homicide, or crime scene processing did you do in this homicide?
The Wake County Sheriff's Department had issued a second search warrant for 12412 Schoolhouse Street.
And what is your understanding of that address, or who had lived at that address?
I believe that Jose Perez and Joanna Madonna shared that address.
And were you called to go back or to go to that address?
Yes, I was.
And what day was that you were called?
It was Tuesday, June 25th of 2013.
What was your purpose in going to the house that day?
The purpose that day was to look for any additional pieces of evidence that we could find, as well as possibly look for some areas of suspected blood, as well as possible shoes.
And tell us kind of what you did upon arriving at the house that day.
Upon arriving at the house that day, I took overall photographs of the house to depict the conditions in which I found them. I then entered the garage. I took pictures of the entire house, and then I began to process in the garage. We wanted to see again if there was any blood that we could find that we couldn't see with our naked eye, just like I did at the crime scene. This time, instead of using a chemical that we used called luminescence, I used Blue Star. It's very similar to the luminescence, meaning it has to be mixed very similarly. It's put in a spray bottle and it's sprayed throughout an area, and if there's blood, it will give a bluish white light, and it has to be done in the dark.
Okay, so to what area did you apply this Blue Star?
In the garage, there were two pieces of carpet. There was a multicolored carpet and then a lighter colored carpet. We sprayed it on those particular areas.
Tell me exactly where in the garage those
If you're looking
carpets
at
were located.
If you're looking at the house, the garage was to your left. The multicolored carpet was closer to the actual residence of the house, where the light and colored carpet was more towards the garage door.
And once you applied the Blue Star, what, if anything, did you notice?
There were several areas on both of the carpets that fluoresced, that had that reaction, that blue-white reaction we were looking for. The Blue Star is just another presumptive test for blood. So after an area fluoresces, we then test it with phenolphthalein to actually see if it's blood. Blue Star and these chemicals that fluoresce tend to have several false positives. So we tested those various areas with phenolphthalein, and none of those areas had a reaction with phenolphthalein, meaning that it was not blood that was fluorescing.
Is there anything that would alter the outcome that you might get when you're testing suspected blood
With phenolphthalein?
with phenolphthalein?
Phenolphthalein also reacts with other types of blood. So not just human blood, it'll react to other types of animal blood as well. But that's basically the only thing that it'll have a different reaction with.
Is there anything that would prevent an area of blood from you getting a positive presumptive with phenolphthalein? Anything that would contaminate?
If the sample of blood is really watered down or diluted, it could not give us a reaction.
In addition to applying the Blue Star in the garage, let me ask you, actually, before I move on to that, what about, cleaning products or other things? Is it possible that that would give you a different result with phenolphthalein?
With Blue Star, it will. Blue Star will react what we call a false positive with various cleaning supplies, detergents, chlorines, paints, even varnishes. It will react to certain items that have iron in them as well.
So when you indicate that Blue Star will react, meaning that you might get an area illuminated that turns out it could be related to something else or be something that's been contaminated.
That's correct.
What else did you do while you were at the house, on June 25th?
While I was at the house, the sheriff's department was also there, and they conducted a search of the house. And upon their search, they found a MagTech ammunition box as well as a Taurus handgun box in the master bedroom closet.
What did you do in relation to those items?
I collected the Taurus box as well as the ammunition box.
And did you subsequently process those?
I did. I processed those later that night back in the lab.
Okay, what did that involve?
With the MagTech and the Taurus box, I examined those for possible latent evidence. Again, it's the same process that I've already talked about. So the cardboard of those boxes was, again, a shiny cardboard. So they were placed in a super glue chamber. It was then processed with the black magnetic powder, and fingerprints were developed off of both the ammunition box as well as the Taurus box.
Your may I approach?
Yes, ma'am. Okay, while they're looking at that. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our lunch and recess at this point. During our lunch and recess period, it is your duty not to talk among yourselves about this case. Duty not to talk to the parties, the witnesses, or the lawyers about anything at all. Further duty not to talk to anyone else, to allow anyone else to talk with you, to say anything in your presence about this case. If anyone communicates with you in any way, you let the sheriff know when you come back. Don't do any individual research or investigation on your own about any issue touching on this trial. Stay away from your smartphones, and do not form or express opinion about this case during this time. With that, while everyone else in the courtroom remains seated, I'm going to excuse the 13 of you and ask that you return and assemble in the jury room at 2:30 this afternoon. Again, we go by that clock. That chart's